My name is Mary, and I'm in my early 51s. I've been married to James for 21 years, and our life is mostly peaceful and happy. Even though we don't have children, we're content. James is 3 years older than me, and he works at a regular company. He hasn't really changed much over the years, but because I only work part-time, we have a little extra money to spend on nice things. Our marriage has been steady, without any big problems. But then, something small happened that shook up our calm life. It all started when I learned that my father had passed away and I inherited his apartment. After James and I got married, my father moved into a new, modern 3-bedroom apartment. Meanwhile, James and I lived in my childhood home, a 5-bedroom house full of memories. My father had given it to us as a wedding gift, and he was happy for us to start our life there. I was so touched by his gesture. When my father passed away, I inherited his apartment. I loved that place, so I decided to rent it out right away. But one day, during conversation with James's family, an unexpected suggestion came up. Someone said, Rachel and her kids are living in a small place. How about they move into Mary's 5-bedroom house? Rachel is James's younger sister. She's divorced and raising 2 kids in a 3-bedroom apartment, which is probably a bit cramped for them. To be honest, my relationship with Rachel hasn't been great. Every time we meet, she makes little sarcastic comments about the fact that James and I don't have kids yet. James and I got married just before we turned 32, and ever since then, Rachel has been making these remarks. As I got older, her comments became even more cutting, like, "You're over 32 and still no kids?" Or, "Don't people see you as less of a woman without children?" What hurt me the most was something she said after my father passed away. She looked at me and said, "It's a shame your father never got to see a grandchild." That really shocked me and left me feeling numb. Rachel is actually 5 years older than me, so instead of a younger sister-in-law, she feels more like an older one. We've always tried to be kind to her and treat her like family, but those remarks really stung. I naturally built a wall in my heart against Rachel. I'm an only child, and my father was my only family. Losing him was hard enough, but Rachel's words made it even worse. Some time had passed since my father's death, and I hadn't seen Rachel for a while. Then, out of nowhere, my mother-in-law brought up something unexpected. She said, Rachel is willing to pay $1,000 a month in rent. When I saw the smug look on her face, I was too shocked to say anything. The apartment we lived in was old, but we took good care of it, and it was still in good shape. There was a big mall nearby, and transportation was easy with buses and trains. If we rented out the apartment, I thought it would go for at least $2,500 a month. But $1,000? That was unbelievable. Didn't they know the going rate for this area? Renting out such a spacious 5-bedroom apartment for only $1,000 a month was ridiculous. Maybe they thought I had agreed, because I didn't say anything right away. My mother-in-law seemed really excited about the idea and said, "You already have another apartment, right? You can live there instead. Even if you don't renew the lease, Rachel and her kids can move in, so it's all fine." How long is the contract? James seemed excited too and added, "That's a great idea. The place your father lived is new and perfect for just the 2 of us." At this point, the conversation was moving forward without even considering our thoughts, and I started to panic. I couldn't help but blurt out, "Isn't there an option for all of us to live together in this apartment?" James's parents had a big house, and they were the only ones living there. They even had rooms for both James and Rachel, so I thought it would be fine if they all moved in. After all, they said they wanted a bigger place. Normally, before making decisions like this, you talk with the family. But moving in with James's parents would mean Rachel's kids would have to change schools, and they seemed worried about the cost and hassle of getting new school uniforms and gym clothes. I didn't want to directly say I didn't want to rent the apartment to Rachel in front of my mother-in-law, but I said, "This is my hometown. I can't just leave so easily." I left their house, but my mother-in-law said, "You don't have to decide right away," which made me feel like she wasn't giving up. When I got home, I asked James, "This apartment is special to us. Why are you so quick to decide to leave?" He seemed surprised and said, "Well, it's not a single-family home." I was shocked by his answer. Maybe because he grew up in a house, an apartment didn't feel like a real home to him. But I wished he could at least understand my feelings and apologize. Instead, I felt upset. I raised my voice and said, "This is my home, my apartment. Why are you making decisions without asking me?" James looked upset and replied, "We've been married for 21 years. Why are you saying my apartment? It's our apartment." I could hear the frustration in his voice. I wished he could understand how much this apartment meant to me as my special home. If he had hesitated about renting it to his sister, I might not have felt so hurt by his words. But in that moment, I felt deeply hurt. We tried to calmly talk about it many times after that, but it was difficult. James didn't seem to understand my feelings at all. He started calling me things like money-minded, stubborn, and selfish. As time went on, the distance between us stayed the same. During this period, I kept getting messages from my mother-in-law asking if we had made any progress on moving. The pressure from both my mother-in-law and James, who didn't seem to understand my perspective, wore me down. I felt like I was nearing my breaking point. Then one day, I was shocked to receive an email from Rachel. She wrote, "Why are you two, without kids, holding on to such a big space? You don't need it. Just move out." I hadn't heard from Rachel since we started talking about the apartment, and now here she was, telling me to leave. I never imagined she would send such a blunt message. Reading her email, I reflected on everything I had been through and felt a wave of self-doubt. The idea of divorce crossed my mind several times. Each time, I tried to calm myself, but I was reaching my limit. I decided to visit the local government office to start the process for a divorce. I also reached out to a specific place to understand the next steps. A few days later, with a clearer mindset, I went to the court. After checking, I found out that both the apartment we lived in and the one I was renting out were in my name. It was legally mine. Confirming this gave me the strength to confront my situation with James. I thought about what I needed to do next and decided we needed to talk seriously. I told James, "I've said this many times, this is my house. I can't stand the idea of renting it to Rachel. I don't want to give my home to someone who treats me poorly. Please talk to your mother and Rachel about this." James's face darkened like he was tired of the conversation. I had already told him about all the hurtful things Rachel had said to me and how much I disliked her behavior. I wanted him to understand my feelings, but instead, he sided with Rachel, saying, "Rachel is right." It was then that I realized how things had truly changed. I could have gone through with a divorce at that moment, ending the pain I was feeling. But I couldn't bring myself to end a 21-year relationship so quickly. Deep down, I was ready for divorce if James rejected what I had to say. Still, I thought to myself, maybe I'm being too sensitive about Rachel. Maybe she isn't being as condescending as I think, and I'm just exaggerating things. James didn't get it though. He said, "I really don't understand why you feel this way." His words hurt. Was I the only one feeling like this? I asked him, "If that's how you feel, will you sign this?" And I handed him the divorce papers. James looked shocked but quickly replied, "Do you really want to end our relationship over something so small?" He didn't understand that it wasn't a small issue to me. "I'm serious," I said, looking him in the eyes. "I care about Rachel too, but lately, things between us have changed. I don't feel the same love anymore, so I'm leaving." My heart ached when I saw how casual James was about it, smiling like it wasn't a big deal. It made me feel like he didn't understand how deeply this was affecting me, and I felt tears start to well up. I just wanted him to leave sooner rather than later. James then said in a softer tone, "Maybe Rachel and my mother don't really want to get along with you. Have you ever thought that because you always focus on yourself, our relationship has suffered?" His words stung again. We had always misunderstood each other, even while trying to make things work. "I think it's impossible to fix our relationship now, no matter how much we talk. I can't imagine a future with you anymore," I said calmly. "If you can't understand my feelings, then we'll have to go through with the divorce." James looked both surprised and sad as he asked, "Do you really feel that way?" Then he left the house without saying anything else. He didn't sign the divorce papers, and he left all his belongings behind. A A few days later, James came back. He looked sad and unsure. "What should we do from here?" he asked quietly. I could tell he thought I might forgive him if he acted humble, but my mind was already made up. There was nothing left to discuss. "If you agree to the divorce, sign the papers," I said. "If not, we'll have to take legal action. And by the way, I've decided to let go of this house." I had been thinking about selling it for a while. The day I went to get the divorce papers, I talked to Mr. Eric, an old friend of my father's. I'd known him for years. When I was a child, Mr. Eric was always by my father's side until the very end. He even attended my father's funeral and gave me his business card, telling me to reach out if I ever needed help. The card had the details of his law firm. Thanks to Mr. Eric, I was able to get help from a legal advisor to deal with my father's inheritance. When I told Mr. Eric about my situation, he gave me honest and helpful advice. He explained the importance of checking property ownership, dealing with divorce complications, and other tips that helped protect me. After James left the house for a while, I decided to sell the apartment. I quickly contacted real estate agents to start the process. I also informed Mr. Eric about my rocky relationship with James and how he refused to sign the divorce papers. Asked for his help in handling the divorce. When James found out I was selling the apartment, he was shocked and angry. "You always said this was our family home. Are you really going to sell such an important place? After all the concern you had about Rachel, you're being selfish," he said. But his words didn't affect me anymore. I looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "Do you have anything else to say?" James seemed surprised but quickly began arguing. "Why would you make such a big decision on your own? The apartment may be in your name, but after a divorce, there should be a division of property. This place belongs to both of us, right?" James was clearly emotional and desperate, but I calmly smiled and responded, "Actually, this apartment has been in my name since before we got married. I checked with my lawyer, and anything owned before marriage isn't part of the property division." Selling the apartment was difficult, but I didn't want to hold on to painful memories in this home. With the advice from Mr. Eric about property laws, I decided selling was the best choice. When James realized the truth, his attitude changed quickly. "I'm sorry," he said. "This place means a lot to you, but it hasn't been sold yet, right? Please reconsider. Let's give it another try. I'll talk to Rachel and Mom. Just stop the divorce and the sale of the apartment." As I listened to him plead, I found myself wondering why I had stayed with him for 21 long years. I was shocked that I had chosen someone like him. "Don't try to act nice now. When we were together, you never stood by my side. The idea of starting over with you is impossible, so please leave. We both need to move on." He wasn't easily convinced, and this created a big gap between us. But after going through all the necessary steps, I was finally able to end our relationship. It felt like the start of a new chapter in my life. At first, being alone seemed scary, but I realized it wasn't as bad as I thought. Now I live in a new 3-bedroom apartment, living life the way I want. My mother is with me, and even though he's gone, I'm fine. Everything is okay. My husband once coldly said, "You're not needed here." That shocked me. I had been sending $3,100 every month to his parents, but it didn't matter to him. Then, to make things worse, my mother-in-law added, "A wife who can't do proper housework isn't needed," with a cold smile, almost as if she was happy to see me go. Realizing there was no point in trying to please these people anymore, I decided to leave. With a calm smile, I replied, "If that's what you think, then I'll go." My husband looked shocked. "My name is Lauren, and I'm a 35-year-old office worker. I met my husband Michael through a blind date set up by a friend. He was friendly and outgoing, and we hit it off quickly. We got married, and now we've been together for 3 years. We don't have any children yet. Before we got married, Michael lived with his mother. When we got married, he suggested building a new house on his family's property. He said, 'I'm worried about my mom living alone. I want to be with her, but I also want us to have our own life together. I think this is the best idea.' I asked, 'But won't we have to get a mortgage for the house?' Michael reassured me, 'The house will be paid for with the inheritance my father left me. We won't need a mortgage, and the land is free.' The house will be in my name, and we can just support my mom with monthly payments. What do you think? Does that sound okay? I wondered, aren't you worried about your mom's finances? Michael replied, we'll be helping her, and she has income from her part-time job and her pension, so everything will be fine. It seemed like a good plan, and Michael even said, when you work late, my mom can help with the housework. It will make things easier for you. We would live in separate houses, but on the same property. I was excited about starting our new life together and building our dream home. Having help with housework during busy times seemed perfect. But later, I realized how naive I had been. In the beginning, our marriage was wonderful. We were both busy with work, but the house was easy to maintain, and everything seemed fine. My mother-in-law had her part-time job and didn't visit us too often. We shared the living expenses, and things felt balanced. One day, though, Michael brought up a new idea. He said, I'll take care of all the household expenses, so can you transfer the regular payment to Mom every month? I want you to handle that. I was surprised and asked, how much will it be? He said, maybe about $2,200 a month. But when I did the math, I realized $2,200 was less than what we had been sending. So, without telling Michael, I decided to continue sending $2,800 a month to his mom. That amount took a big chunk out of my paycheck, but with other expenses like utilities, groceries, and medical bills, Michael was still covering most of the costs. His salary went into our joint account, and from there I made the payments and added the rest to our savings. This arrangement worked for about a year. However, when my mother-in-law quit her part-time job and started visiting more often, things began to change. One day, she said, I'm getting older, so I decided to quit my job and take it easy. Michael responded, that's okay, Mom. You don't need to worry anymore. We're here for you. Thank you, Michael.
You've always been so kind, she said.
At first, it was nice to see them getting along. But then she started to criticize the way I kept the house. It looks like you haven't been cleaning properly. There's dust everywhere. This is unacceptable. I apologized. I'm really sorry. I've been busy with work and haven't been able to keep up with everything. That's just an excuse, she said. You're living in Michael's house, so the least you can do is take care of the basic chores. And I've heard you take shortcuts with cooking, too. Is that true? I sometimes make simple meals when I come home late from work, but I still do my best, I explained. Then she said something that really hurt. Maybe it was a mistake choosing you as Michael's wife. After all these years, the fact that you still don't have children is also a problem. Her words stung, and I realized that things had taken a serious turn for the worse. I felt like not having children wasn't entirely my fault, but arguing about it would only cause more problems. Originally, my mother-in-law had promised to help with household chores when things got tough, especially since we were living on the same property. However, it seemed both Michael and my mother-in-law had forgotten that promise. Now, whenever she was around, she constantly criticized me, so I decided to just ignore her comments. Amid all this, a bigger issue arose. Our joint account balance was getting low because Michael's salary hadn't been deposited for 5 months. I confronted him, asking, why hasn't your salary been deposited? What he said next shocked me. He had quit his job and was looking for a new one. I thought he had been going to work every day, but he had actually been job hunting. Why did you quit without telling me? This is serious, I said. I'm sorry, I feel bad about it, Michael replied. My boss was always on my case, nagging me for every little mistake. Everyone makes mistakes, right? But he acted like I was the only one. Michael explained that a mistake he made caused the company a big loss, and while most bosses would give a warning, his didn't. I understood that his work environment was tough, but since he had already quit, we needed to figure out what to do next. Have you found any new job prospects? I asked. The problem is, I can't find a job that matches my skills, he said. At this point, shouldn't you just take a job, even if it's not ideal? We can't afford to be too picky right now, I suggested. But Michael insisted, no, I want to choose carefully for my next job, where I plan to stay until retirement. What about our finances? I asked. Well, you're working too, so you can help support us for a while, right? He replied, as if it were no big deal. I realized he wasn't going to change his mind, so I decided to endure until he found another job. But with our income so low, after sending money to my in-laws, there was barely anything left. We had to dip into our savings, which were almost gone. To make up for this, I decided to work more hours to increase my income. Luckily, my workplace valued me, and they agreed to let me work overtime. However, when I returned home late, my mother-in-law would often be waiting for me, ready to criticize. I couldn't help but wonder, how did it come to this? I can't believe a daughter-in-law doesn't do any housework, my mother-in-law said angrily. I'm sorry, it's because of work, I tried to explain. Making excuses, going out to play, and then asking Michael for more money? I need money for living expenses and the remittances. My salary alone isn't enough, I said. Hearing this, my mother-in-law got even angrier. Complaining about just $2,800? You live in Michael's house for free and don't even do any chores. Unbelievable. It was shocking to me that she thought $2,800 was nothing. I worked hard to earn that money. It seemed like she took the monthly payments for granted and didn't appreciate their value. She added, because you don't do the housework, I have to, or Michael suffers. It's hard dealing with such an incompetent daughter-in-law. Even though she acted like she did all the work, my mother-in-law often bought ready-made meals from the store and only did laundry for herself and Michael. The kitchen was always left messy, with dirty dishes everywhere. Michael and my mother-in-law always had their meals prepared, but not for me. I was usually told to eat whatever was left over. Michael would just relax in front of the TV while I dealt with my mother-in-law's harsh words. Over time, my feelings for my husband started to fade. His job search wasn't going well, and he was too proud to apply to anything less than top companies. A year had passed, and he still hadn't found a job. He just spent his days doing nothing. Hey, if this keeps up, we're going to run out of savings. Can't you get a part-time job to help with the bills? I asked him. Michael glared at me and said sharply, why should I get a part-time job? This house isn't even in your name, it's mine. You're just living here and can't even take care of me properly, so of course you have to pay the bills. I felt the future was looking bleak. I was paying for everything, our living expenses and the remittances to his mother, but there was a limit to how much I could earn. Remittances? It's just $2,800. Stop nagging me. If you don't like it, leave my house, he said angrily, hitting the table before walking out of the room. Michael dismissed the amount I worked hard to earn, calling it just $2,800. Our relationship had never been more strained. Then, unexpectedly, some good news came. Michael had a chance to get a job at a company run by his mother's friend. While the salary wasn't as high as his old job, I was just thankful he would be working again. The trial period was set for 5 months. Michael grumbled, I don't think this company is the right fit for my skills, but it's hard to say no since my mom introduced me. As long as you're willing to work, that's what matters. Do your best and aim for full employment, I replied. I never imagined that Michael's new job would cause more problems. At first, he left for work every morning with energy, but after a month, things changed. He started coming home late, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. His jacket smelled like a woman's perfume that I didn't recognize. On top of that, he stopped contributing his salary to our household and even started withdrawing money from our joint account without asking me, while still sending the monthly remittance to his mother. I decided to stop putting my salary into the joint account, which made Michael furious. He confronted me, asking, why aren't you putting money in the account? The balance is almost zero. Where is your salary going? You're not paying for the living expenses. Tell me how you're using the money. I told him, that's not fair. Am I the only one earning and managing our household? If you contribute, I will too. Michael shot back. This house is mine. It's only natural for you to contribute. I was shocked by how he expected me to use my earnings for his spending, pay the remittances to his mother, and cover all the household costs. I also started to suspect he was having an affair, though I didn't have proof yet. I decided to investigate. Since I couldn't afford to hire a private investigator, I had to do it myself. One night, while Michael was asleep, I used his fingerprint to unlock his phone. I found messages with a woman named Julie, and the content was shocking. The messages said things like, I really enjoyed our date today. I wish we could be together forever. And would you consider marrying me? I'll get rid of my wife. Wait for me, can't wait to start our life in a new home. I took screenshots and saved the messages to my phone. I then decided to find out who Julie was. But before I could act on it, I came home from work one day to find bags piled up at the entrance. What's all this? I asked. Michael replied coldly, I've decided to live with my mom instead of you, since you don't do the housework. You made this decision without talking to me? This is my house too. You can't just make decisions like this, I said. He responded, You have no right to complain. Since I'm paying for the remittances and living expenses, I can decide what happens here. It's better with my mom around, so you should leave. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law also chimed in saying, A wife who doesn't do housework is useless, smiling like she was happy to see me go. At that moment, I realized it was pointless to keep trying with these people. I made my decision in that moment. First, please sign this, I said, pulling out the divorce papers I had prepared from my bag and handing them to Michael. Confused, he asked, When did you prepare this? The day you told me to leave the house. I got them right after you said that. I replied calmly. Michael was surprised, but eventually he agreed and signed the papers. I signed them as well and said, I'll submit these to the city office. I'll arrange for a moving company to get my things out as soon as I find a new place. I want you out as soon as possible. My mother-in-law yelled at me, but I ignored her. I packed the essentials into a bag and headed to my parents' house. They were surprised by my sudden arrival, but they welcomed me with open arms, understanding that something was wrong. The next day, I took some time off from work and began to take action. First, I submitted the divorce papers to the city office. Then, I started looking for a lawyer to help with the divorce process and any compensation I could claim. I also began searching for a new place to live. It was a busy time, but I felt a sense of fulfillment as I moved forward with my life. I found a nice, modern apartment perfect for a single person and hired a moving company to help with the move. On the day of the move, I returned to the house while Michael was at work, but his mother was there. The movers took my furniture, appliances, and other belongings, piece by piece. You're taking everything? The house will be so empty, she said. These are all the things I bought when we got married. I used my savings to get the furniture and appliances. Since the house is in Michael's name, these items are mine, I explained. She couldn't argue and was clearly frustrated. After moving into my new, luxury apartment, I started enjoying my independence. I was able to use all my income for myself, and thanks to my hard work and overtime, I got promoted and my salary increased. Life went on like this for about 5 months. Then I started getting a lot of calls from my mother-in-law. I regretted not blocking her, but eventually I gave in and answered one of her many calls. Hello, Lauren, can we talk? She said. What do you want? I asked, tired of her persistence. Please, can you come back? She pleaded. What? I thought you wanted me to leave. I'm sorry. I've thought about it and reflected on everything, she replied. She wanted me to start sending her $2,800 again, just like before. I couldn't believe how selfish she was. She explained that Michael's affair at work had been exposed, and he couldn't get a regular job anymore, only part-time work. He and Julie had started living together, but Julie didn't like living with his mother, so she moved back to her old home. Without the money I used to send, she was struggling to survive on her pension. I have nothing to do with you anymore. I won't send you any money, I said firmly. Then I blocked her number and also blocked Michael's. I didn't want any more contact with either of them. But a few days later, Michael showed up outside my workplace. Lauren, I'm sorry. Can we start over? I'm in trouble, he said, clearly desperate. I was shocked to see him there. He explained that living with Julie hadn't worked out because she couldn't do housework, and after the affair became public, he felt uncomfortable at work and quit. Their relationship fell apart because of their financial struggles and constant arguments, and Julie had left him. It's too late, I told him. I don't want to see you again. If you try to ambush me like this again, I'll call the police. He shouted, Wait, as I walked away, but I ignored him and went home. Later, with the help of my lawyer, I received $50,000 in compensation, and Julie paid me an additional $210,000. I heard that Michael was now working several part-time jobs to pay off his debts and had even resorted to shady ways of getting money. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law had gone back to working part-time and was living frugally. They were constantly blaming each other for their problems. Julie had started working night shifts to pay off her debts after quitting her job and breaking up with Michael. As for me, I've adopted a little dog and am enjoying peaceful, happy days in my new apartment, looking forward to whatever life has